to Feminist Buzzkills, the show that has never made racist comments on nudeafrica.com.
Not
Um,
yet.
I mean, it's a matter of time. I'm Liz Winstead, and I'm joined by my co-host, Moji Olivo-Dale. Hi, Moji. Welcome back.
Hello, Liz. Oh my gosh. Today we're going to talk about Florida's outrageous full court press on trying to purge signatures from the Florida abortion ballot initiative. And there were some men who went above and beyond this week in bringing cruelty to the next level, trying to claim that women are just out here in these streets lying about dying.
Our guest joining us are comedian, writer, and actor Zainab Johnson from the hilarious Amazon Prime comedy special, Hijabs Off. And to break down all the extra secret Project 2025 plans to destroy our bodily autonomy is one-third of the brilliant crooked podcast Strict Scrutiny. The one and only Kate Shaw is here.
And we are here. Liz, I've missed you. We have not been together for months.
It has been a really long time. You were hosting without me. I was hosting without you. It was it was fun, but I also missed you.
I missed you so much.
How was your summer? We had a long
I
break.
know it's a wild in late September question, but yes, it was a lovely summer. Really nice. Went to a lot of pools, and since I have no hair any longer, swimming in the pool was really, really fun.
That's nice. That's nice.
And you, any bodies of water of note?
I did not hit a pontoon this summer, which is a first for me, and it was kind of terrible.
Wild.
The summer was kind of fits and starts because it was like the Democratic convention and we had Netroots Nation. And so we were just like conferencing constantly. And I have to tell you that a highlight was definitely going to the DNC with singing abortion pills and parading them around to parties and to hotel bars and to while people were waiting in line to get into the convention to go to parks. It was really fun because people like, "What are you?" And it was like, "Take this handout." It was we passed out 1,000 pieces of literature teaching people about medication abortion while Dukes was the lead singing pill.
You guys looked incredible.
It was really,
It
really
looked
cute.
so cool.
I
I
know.
mean, I feel like most people, don't actually know the whole abortion pill protocol. And so for you guys to like be a walking medication abortion protocol was just, I mean, and also the customs were inflatable. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and sparkly and, we all knew that it was a really fun idea to go out there in these big singing inflatable abortion pill costumes, and we have the whole protocol, right? It's Miffy and Miso, so there's 4. We call them Miffy and the Miso tones. They're disarmingly charming
Yeah.
when you see them, and so I kind of like also having something that there's so many myths around and
Yes.
so much scary information from the antis out there to have these very charming abortion pills passing out information. It all felt very soothing.
It was also it looked like Disney park abortion pills, right? They were like, "Oh, character from, your favorite TV show, Miffy, the mistletoe."
It was really great. Yeah. It was really, really fun. And, it's just like we've just been going nonstop. And so it's just been we've been kind of potting, and then Kristen filled in when you got the Rona, and then I was gone. And
And
so
Kristen filled in when you were gone.
I know. I mean, it is just feels it's like a lot. So, bear with us, bear buzzkills, as we inconsistently come back into your lives. We will be back for real with consistency post-election, but right now we're just in all kinds of wild information gathering and giving, and, I'm glad we're back with this incredible show. In fact, we should probably tell folks what's happening because October is big for us, and there's a
Huge.
bunch of cool actions, and so before we kick into our show, I'm gonna kick into what's happening in October, or as we're calling it, Comstocktober.
Which is terrifying, terrifying. Really spooky season.
It's Comstock Act Awareness Month because no spooky season would be complete without trying to slay the zombie law known as the Comstock Act.
Oh, so, this is so exciting. So Comstock Act Awareness Month, is there a ribbon?
I mean, there should be a ribbon, but there probably couldn't be a ribbon because it would be perceived as a sex toy and it would be banned. So why bother, quite frankly, you know what I mean?
Oh, no, I absolutely know what you mean because Comstock was real creative in what could and could not be a sex toy.
That's right.
But ribbon or not, you can join AAF for all kinds of Comstocktober events and actions to end the Comstock Act once and for all. One of the things you can do is sign our petition to tell Congress to repeal the Comstock Act right now. We have almost 50,000 signatures. Oh my gosh, and counting. Let's blow it up. The link to the petition will be in the show notes.
Or you can get real busy with us because we all know that one step towards killing a zombie law is to enshrine abortion in your state constitution. So mark your calendars for October 8th, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's AAF's Operation Save Abortion Ballot Initiative Edition. It's a dope interactive virtual training with organizers from all the states working to enshrine abortion access into their constitution. That's 9 of them that are going to be on one training with us. They're going to tell us what's at stake and then put us into breakout rooms and put us to work so we can all learn how to get out the vote. It's going to be awesome. So if you want to know where you can register, go to operationsaveabortion.com.
And we will end Comstocktober with an AF-sponsored Halloween debate between Minnesota Senator Tina Smith and Zombie Comstock, moderated by our own Liz Winstead. Hey, that's you, Liz. That's you moderating.
I am moderating a debate with like a legit senator and a legit zombie Comstock, who, aka the incredible writer Molly Gaby. It's going to be a riot.
Oh my gosh. So everyone join us for the fun. All of the info will be in our show notes, and we will be launching a whole Comstock webpage October 1st for one-stop shopping at repealthecomstockact.org.
Wow, it's a lot. Let's start the show. Are you ready to start? Have we started the show yet? I feel like we haven't. Let's start the show.
Who knows?
Let's just do it the way we know how, with a steaming dump of this week's abortion news.
Senate Democrats are forcing a few say it to my face votes this week to get Republicans on record showing they would literally let patients die rather than guarantee a life-saving abortion or help with the cost when they have to travel to another state to not die. We wish we could be hopeful, but to be honest, an anti-abortion leopard never changes its spots.
And in shocked, not shocked news, a Catholic judge in North Dakota sided with the Catholic Diocese of Bismarck and ruled that federal anti-discrimination laws violate the church's First Amendment right to discriminate against all day, every day, and twice on Sunday LGBTQ employees or employees receiving IVF or abortion care. In short, a religion started by men, is run by men, and was designed to uphold a patriarchal system that solely benefits men, sued to keep it that way, and a man ruled in their favor because freedom.
And in even more religious shenanigans, down in Texas, Mark Lee Dixon, an anti-abortion pastor, has been paying his lawyer from his church's offering plate. This Pied Piper of patriarchy paid thousands in legal fees to Jonathan Mitchell, the author of the creepy Texas bounty hunter law, to help Dixon craft anti-abortion ordinances all over the U.S., which doesn't seem sketchy or violating of the church separation of church and state at all. No siree, nothing to see here. Just move along, people.
And this has been your steaming news dump. Moj, let's get to the stories that we want to break down further.
Whew. Well, Florida police are taking an alarmingly personal interest in voters who signed the abortion rights petition. In a stunningly bald-faced act of voter intimidation, Florida's election police are going door to door to question people who signed Amendment 4, the ballot initiative that would enshrine abortion rights into the state constitution. So currently in Florida, they have a 6-week abortion ban in place, but if Amendment 4 passes, Floridians will have the right to an abortion up to 24 weeks or at a healthcare provider's discretion. Minors would still need parental notification. Florida organizers collected 100,000 more signatures than they needed to get this initiative on the ballot in November, and the Florida Supreme Court cleared it. So what exactly are the cops looking for?
This is so garbage. And I just want to say that when you say Florida organizers collected 100,000 more signatures than they needed, that's 1 million signatures. They needed 900,000 and they got 1 million.
Yep. They did. They really did put in the work. It's a kind of annoying because it's using state money, right, to target residents for engaging in their political process, which is terrifying. And then Governor DeSantis is defending this, like he's saying, oh, well, some of the names of the people who signed the petition are dead people. But then why are they going to people's doors? Maybe they should go to like death certificates and cemeteries. Like, I really don't understand, Liz.
Well, I also want to say if somebody's dead, why are they going to somebody's door?
Yeah.
They're not going to answer.
no one's there. That's what I mean. Like, why are you going to people's doors?
And also, like, this is DeSantis' gross MO. And not just DeSantis, I have to say this is a conservative MO. If you can't win, then you have to just cheat and subvert and more importantly and more dangerously intimidate,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what this is doing. And the power part of what is empowering this is that in 2022, DeSantis created a voter fraud organization called Election Crimes and Security Unit to kind of ferret out the things that he thought were things that could be concerning, like third party voter registration, organization fraud, ballot initiative, petition fraud, double voters, felons, campaign finance, things like that. And in the time that they've been in action, they haven't found anything. It's like 20 people they got for illegal voting, and the people who they got, those 20 people, had been issued voter registrations by the state. So it was actually the state messing up, not the individuals.
We talk about this all the time in the podcast that, again, another shenanigan that these people do is they pretend there's a problem, scare people into thinking there's a problem, then create a solution, the Election Crimes and Security Unit, and then all of a sudden there's no problem anymore. And then
Right.
they act like their Elections Crimes and Security Unit solved something when it didn't do shit because there wasn't shit to do.
To that point, Liz, so about 6 states did things like this, like created similar things. Again, I haven't seen the ethnicity of the people who have been approached by around this petition amendment 4, but in the states that created these post 2020 election integrity units, of 6 states, they got 139 prosecutions in 6 states. And of that, 76 of the people who were prosecuted were Black or Hispanic, and 58% are registered Democrats. So also, it doesn't seem like these are being applied like across the board in any sort of fair way. This is voter intimidation.
And also, it just feels like, isn't it a coincidence that there seems to be widespread voter fraud everywhere, that there is a majority of people who may put a ballot initiative or vote for a candidate that conservatives don't like? You know, we don't see, like, we're not, like, you don't see it anywhere. There's no single piece of voter fraud in Arkansas
Nope.
or in Alabama or Mississippi where there's widespread Democratic hooliganery happening, right? Anti-democratic hooligans.
Mhm.
But just yet, when the people have a chance to speak, Moji, somehow all of the people are rogues and ne'er-do-wells. Like, it's wild.
And it's so wild because you hear them like telling these stories of like, oh my God, all these illegal voting, all these things happening. In 6 states, they found 139. More people than that live in my building.
Yeah, I believe same with me. And you know, it's like when you look at on a federal level, you know, they were trying to push through this thing called the SAFE Act, you know, and they were trying to tie it so that they wouldn't shut the government down. And the
Mhm.
SAFE Act was to say, you know, to secure that people who weren't qualified to vote wouldn't, undocumented people, et cetera, et cetera. But what they don't say that's in the fine print of the SAFE Act is you could not be allowed to vote if, let's say, you got married and your name changed, but it didn't change on your registration. Like, it's a disenfranchisement piece
Mm.
that is got all these separate pieces of disenfranchisement that we already can't people who are undocumented already can't vote.
Right.
But what it does is disenfranchise a whole bunch of people who have maybe a different address and moved, different name, whatever. And so thank God the Democrats were like, yeah, try that, fuckers. Nope, no safe act for you.
Also, like, when you look at sort of how far like conservatives are pushing for this restricting people's right to vote, you just wonder, what do they not want us to vote for? Right? Like, this is what I think whenever people are like, what's the point of voting? And it's like, well, if there's no point, then why are conservatives doing all they can to make it difficult or impossible for people to vote? I just feel like that's a good question to ask.
For stuff they don't like.
Yes. So just to go back to Amendment 4, it needs 60% of the voters to vote yes for it to pass, which is a pretty high bar. I mean, to put it in perspective, the Ohio ballot initiative for abortion rights passed with 56% of the electorate. So they already have stacked the deck in their favor.
I do wanna say, Moji, I've been tracking this like a maniac, and I just came back from an abortion conference and talked to a bunch of people who were working, and this is polling at 70%.
I saw that, yeah.
It will if it passes with that 60% threshold, it will be the first time, and it's pretty exciting, and I think it's just freaking them the fuck out because if you have 70% of the people wanting this amendment, but what does that mean for everything that's on the ballot, and why are they freaking out?
Yep. And that is exciting. I saw that and I was like feeling cautiously optimistic, but I'm also glad that you like talked to people on the ground and kind of got the 411 there and it wasn't just something I read as a throwaway. They're still doing other things to weight the scale, right? Like mostly the police coming was annoying, but they're also asking election administrators to like review signatures, which I think they're just trying to build a case for when this does pass, going back and saying, well, actually, and challenging it and just tying it up and litigations for a little bit. The state launched a website that essentially was saying Florida is protecting life and don't let the fearmongers get lie to you. So there are also just more ways state funds are going to essentially fight this ballot initiative. And they created this is really insidious, Liz. A financial impact statement that will live next to it that says, well, this is going to be expensive because it's going to result in fewer live births and there will be less tax revenue in the state. Why is the tax revenue of the state dependent on the labor of people with uteruses? Liz, I need you to answer this for me.
Well, clearly, because as we've heard, if you don't have children, you aren't really invested in our society. And therefore, if we're not creating literal laborers, what good are we?
Why are we even here? Why are we even here? Why are we even here?
I made a choice to be childless and come to find out that that's about to end for me as I'm just gonna my job now is to take care of other people's children.
I got a kid you can watch, so that's great. It's good that I'll be able to offer you a job in the near future.
I'm here. You know what? I'm here. But I just wanna say, like, as we button out on your story, this is just a reminder of why we're doing this Operation Save Abortion ballot initiative, because we need to get as many people out to the polls as possible so that they cannot deny the amount of people that voted for this amendment. And that's why it's so crucial. And that's why the shenanigans are happening in large and small ways in every one of these states. And so making sure that people on October 8th attend this so that everybody, if you don't live in Florida, you do live in Florida or any one of these other 9 states, you can help participate in getting out the vote. So I just want to say that. All right, moving on.
So those are some state shenanigans happening in Florida, but some conservative men are also acting out of pocket. Liz, will you bring us up to speed?
I think, can I speak for you to say we're terminally online?
Oh, absolutely.
So we're terminally online and we see trends. And I think that for folks who, read the paper, look at news sites, aren't looking at all of the different online shenanigans that are happening. I'm somebody who stays on X because I don't want to cede just the entire platform to a bunch of white supremacists. And there's 2 men I'm going to talk about who have just kind of done extra this week at doubling down on horrific behavior. And so this full chested trash takes that happened this week that of 2 different men who are accusing women of lying about dying because of the abortion bans. And what I'm excited about, Moji, is had this happened 5 years ago, and I think that I wanna just give some of the credit to the work of AAF and how we've been busting stigma and helping people talk about abortion. People came forward, and the internet remained undefeated at taking down these 2 different men and their 2 different hot takes, and the first guy you know probably, and the second person you probably don't know at all, but I just really feel compelled to make him an infamous, like, just hose fuck because he's terrible and because he's a gynecologist. So let's start with guy number 1, right? So we all know John McAtee, right? You know him?
I know him absolutely. He has horrible takes, and I actually don't engage with him as much as I engage with the person who is his antagonist.
Yes, Walt Masterson.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so if you don't know this guy, he's a guy who's on TikTok and his whole shtick is he's like eating at a restaurant and then he gives a hot take. This is the kind of shit the guy says. So liberal love is crazy. She won't take your name. but I'll take half your shit in the divorce. Got it. Like, that's actually a thing that he does.
It's actually, I'm like, that's a verbatim quote.
It's a verbatim quote. He also kinda for me, like, when I watched him on TikTok, the TikTok that got me was this one where he's in his car and he's like, "I like to give fake money out to homeless people. I feel better about myself, and then they get arrested for trying to pass off counterfeit money," and thinks it's cute. He just does this dragging all the time, and he's got this dating site called Date Right.
That apparently have, like, no women on it.
No women on it, and this is where he's posting all this shit. It's most famous for being the go-to source for the FBI because so many J6ers were bragging about being at the Capitol trying to pick up women. The FBI was just, like, scrolling the date site.
Yeah, I was like, "Got it."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But for people who aren't, like, terminally online like us, his rise to power was he was an ex-aide in the first Trump administration, and his biggest job, he was literally appointed he was a producer at Fox News. Like, the dude does not have any governmental background. He was the head of the Presidential Personnel Office, which is the office that's in charge of overseeing 4,000 executive appointments, and he's one of the architects of Project 2025. So he's out here in these, like, internet streets saying this kind of bullshit, right? And I'm convinced he wrote the no fault divorce part actually, because I feel like that guy wants no fault divorce because it's like, I'll never find someone to fuck me. And so unless
And once I find one, I'm
once I
keeping
find
them.
one, they need to stay in my clutches. So this week, girl John decided to challenge after Kamala Harris talked about people who are dying because of abortion bans during the debate. He decided to come out with this hot take.
Can someone track down the women Kamala Harris says are bleeding out in parking lots because Roe v. Wade was overturned? Don't hold your breath.
Oh my gosh, Liz, I saw that and I cheered, the women responding. I cheered. I was like, "This is fucking incredible that he can say this bullshit and right away people are like, me. They're talking about me. She's talking about me." It's
Yes.
incredible.
And the thing is, Moji, it's like he knew it's not true. And what I think that my away from it that I really wanted people to sort of learn about this guy is he said that because he wanted women to come forward so he could observe them reliving their pain over and over. And I think that while I was so proud of people coming forward, I just think he's such a fucking sicko that he wanted to see women telling their stories over and over again. And I just want to say, I'm with you. I'm super proud of these women. 5 years ago, I don't think people would have come forward. 5 years ago, they would have been quiet. There would have been the shame police being like, don't give it any air.
And I think as much as you think he wanted to see it, to watch women in pain, I do agree with you. And I also think he was betting that people would be too ashamed to talk about the way that their state had not served them, had
Yeah.
harmed them directly.
And when you live in your own bubble, friend, John, buddy, unfuckable disaster, you better see what's happening and how activism is working out in these streets with people understanding that abortion, they're no longer ashamed. They are now seeing each other, with the threat that has happened to reproductive care as a whole and and Dobbs falling and all that stuff. We have found each other in our communities and we're talking about it. And, we're getting to the point where we can talk about abortion as normal. And so I was really proud of people who came forward and did direct videos, stitching with him on TikTok
Mhm.
and just responding to him and dragging him for filth. And I can't imagine that's helping his dating site. But you want to know what else isn't probably helping his dating site, Moj?
Oh no, I'd like to hear. What do you mean?
Well-
What is not helping his dating site?
Turns out some other women decided to go online also this week and tell the stories of John, young women, 18, trolling them, macking on them, offering to fly them to LA.
Ew.
And because his dating site is this conservative dating site, people were on TikTok showing receipts, showing the text messages. One woman was like, I did it because I wanted a sweatshirt. And then he's like, come and fly here. And then he's like, are you a liberal? And she said, yeah. And he goes, I don't care. Come anyway. So
Ew, so
yeah,
he's thirsty.
he is
Ew.
creepy and he's thirsty. And then the second woman said that he reached out to her on their app before, and then they moved to text messages, and he used the same phone number, and then he was clearly sending identifiable selfies and beginning to mention sexually explicit acts that made her uncomfortable, and same thing, come to California.
Do conservative men not know how the internet works? Come on, guys.
I mean, they don't know how to do anything. Here's what men don't understand, and it's a public service announcement, Moji, to close this out.
Okay.
Do not send dick pics on spec.
This has been a podcast mantra.
They are a by request situation. It is not a, hey, how you going to feel about this thing? It's not like one of those, send me 5 outfits. I'll send back what I don't want. It is not that. It is let someone ask you.
By request, please.
By request, please. And this guy's predictably awful. Like, and it's not a shock that any of this happened. But in the same week, there is an OBGYN on Twitter, and his name is Dr. Greg Marchand. I saw him on X. He's a gynecologist, and his bio has hashtag genital mutilation, talking about people having gender affirming care.
Oh, he wasn't fighting against. Okay. I saw that, and I didn't think he was talking about gender affirming care, because I always expect more.
Talking about gender affirming care, very anti-trans, very anti-abortion in his feed. But he posted, I'm an OBGYN. She, meaning Kamala, is a lying piece of shit. There are no states where a woman must be on death's door. In all 50 states, an OBGYN can terminate a pregnancy wherever they deem a woman's health is in danger. This is just a lie. And again, people came flooding into his mentions with their stories, including our friend Ryan Hamilton, who you'll remember from our podcast we did after the Idaho EMTALA decision, right? And his experience with his wife almost dying. And what was different about Xmoji, and what was like, which is why I won't leave, is that there were so many commenters saying, you're a liar. These bitches are lying. You've never been through that, in a way that it felt like we didn't cede ground on John McEntee, but this guy had all these creepy supporters because of the nature of the platform, right?
Of
because
course,
the
right,
trolls have
that's
taken
who's
over.
left. That's who's left.
Right. But the good news is those creeps did not deter people from still telling their stories, and then people just going into like his Yelp reviews. And
how were his Yelp reviews, Liz?
His Yelp reviews, let me tell you what. Like, in fact, when I saw people going to the Yelp reviews, I probably came into the story about 8 hours after it is posted, and people were just like piling into it. And so I went to the Yelp, and of course the top of his Yelp says, this business is being monitored by Yelp's support team. And it's like, I'll bet it is. And now there's only 45 reviews. But of course, when you're on Yelp, you got to go to the 1-star reviews, which are the most reviews. And it is just next level, because people are saying this man doesn't follow science. He denies women rights and is a Trump apologist. He has no business practicing medicine. Why does he have a medical degree? I cannot warn you off this office strongly enough. Truly awful experience. This doctor clearly hates women. Newsmax is on in the waiting room. It's terrible.
Oh, shit.
This is the 23rd business I reviewed on Yelp, and only the 3rd review that's been negative. And then he just goes on to say he's garbage. And these are happening before the post came, by the way. I would never advise anyone to bring their loved one to this office. It's crazy how they treat patients. Waited 2 hours. The front desk lady never communicated. It seemed inconvenienced. Yeah, so it's on and on and on. There is a ton of stuff.
I would also be concerned because this doctor literally doesn't watch any news besides Newsmax. When he is like making this statement, did he not pay any attention to the EMTALA case at all? Because that's literally what it was about.
First of all, he practices in Mesa, Arizona. So he doesn't practice in a state where his license, his livelihood, his freedom are on the line, right? And so to act like, and to put doctors in the position of being the bad guys in this. Also, if you look at his picture on X, he's like wearing a baseball hat backwards. He looks like, I don't need
Barkley Dixon.
He looks like a bronecologist. If you want a bronecologist, that is what he is. So it is just Awful. So just wanted to warn everybody, if you're not paying attention, like this is who's like giving a lot of oxygen into the world and into the space. And the fact that it is so profoundly important for them to dismiss people that are dying, it should tell you everything about the mentality of the people that we try to fight every day.
Every day. And we have to fight every day because they don't believe our harms are happening.
They don't believe our harms. Yeah, they sure don't. Well, we'll put all the links to all these creepy guys and the articles in the show notes.
And you can find the best, most up to the minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone, anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
You know what? This is the perfect time to move on to our guest because I love dragging and exposing one of the architects of Project 2025 for being an just misogynistic and now creeper. And I think our guest is the perfect person to tell us a little bit about like what Project 2025 really is.
Oh, absolutely. This is so exciting. Law professor and co host of the incredible Strict Scrutiny podcast is here to go in on some of the insidious details of Project 2025's plan to end abortion for us all. Please welcome Kate Shaw. Kate Shaw, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh. All right. So we're just going to get right into it because I have so much to talk about. So much of the Project 2025 scheme to end abortion is in their Health and Human Services plan to overhaul health and human services. So can you talk in broad strokes about how that gives the president so much power? And then we'll just like get into the specifics of what that looks like.
Absolutely. So, Project 2025 is divided into these sections. The one on health and human services, I think, is one. I mean, the competition is fierce, but it's definitely one of the most disturbing of all of the sections of the Project 2025 plan for authoritarian takeover. So there are a couple of ways that Project 2025 just calls for the implementation of a nationwide abortion ban without having to go through Congress, right? So I think that's something that is critical. So if just the White House is in Donald Trump's hands, whatever happens in Congress is kind of irrelevant because Project 2025 envisions the president doing most or all of this unilaterally. So Project 2025 calls for the FDA to reverse its approval of mifepristone. So that's not something that requires Congress. That's something that an agency can do on its own. So that's obviously the first drug in the 2-drug medication abortion protocol. And there have been efforts through the courts to end access to mifepristone. So far unsuccessful, but this would just be an executive branch effort. So just revoke its approval. I'm not saying that would be easily done. I'm sure there would be a ton of resistance inside FDA because by statute, the officials inside the FDA are supposed to act based on science and data. And all of the data makes really clear that mifepristone is incredibly safe. And there's nothing in its 20+ year history of use for ending early pregnancies to suggest that its approval should be revoked. So I think there would be work required, but that at least is the vision that would be one way of ending access to at least one form of abortion.
I mean, they want to go in and do so much in like the first 180 days, I think. So then they have 4 years to really fight for what they want.
Absolutely.
In the Trump administration, first time around, they put Charmaine Yost. I think she was the communications director of the Health and Human Services, and she used to be the heads of Americans United for Life, and they're just like the most garbagey writing model legislation and doing all this stuff. So it feels like we're going to say throughout this conversation with you, they're already doing it. And so like they've already tried.
Or they've already done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've moved, they've taken steps in the direction of doing it. But I think that what is so chilling about Project 2025 is that it reflects a lot of the lessons learned from the Trump administration that, the maybe one and only, but obviously aspirationally for the authors of Project 2025, the first. And that is that you just have to be much more prepared going in and have these detailed plans. And if you can do that, if you can develop these plans and you can find and then immediately install the right personnel, maybe you could do much, much more the second time. And that, I think, is what Project 2025 reflects. So yes, I mean, they installed ideologues. They, moved in the direction of realizing the vision that Project 2025 represents. But a lot of it went unrealized. And so I think that that's what this reflects is them basically saying, we need to do much more, much faster. And I think personnel is a huge part of it. So in addition to these substantive proposals, there's this whole like job application portal and like vetting process that Project 2025 involves. So if you're like, my passion in life is to end access to abortion and implement a surveillance state for women's uteruses, then, like that's where you go to submit your application materials. But they've basically sort of got this operation ready to go to hit the ground running if, in fact, they are given the keys to the FDA and the rest of the federal government.
And they want to do it fast, right?
Yeah, it's 180 days.
Yeah. So aside from the FDA, there's other stuff. Let's talk about how they want to give hospitals permission to deny emergency abortion care and what that looks like.
Absolutely. So, the EMTALA statute, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act protections that basically require hospitals that take federal funds to provide stabilizing care to patients experiencing all kinds of emergencies, including pregnancy emergencies where the standard of care may be termination. So that's, I think, clearly in the federal law as it's currently implemented. What they would like to do, again, authors and proponents of Project 2025, would be to allow states to ban abortions, even where necessary to preserve the life and health of patients. So to essentially enforce EMTALA in a totally different way. At the same time, they want to remove the protections of this statute, EMTALA, but also expand inclusion of what they call fertility awareness-based methods.
What is that?
I know 3 people got pregnant on that.
No, I think it truly is like, as part of women's health care, encouraging and maybe instructing women to have children. So essentially just like, rather than providing emergency care when needed, ramping up the kind of pro-natalist propaganda as something that is part of the Health and Human Services mission. And there's also very explicitly in the section on HHS, a call for the recognition of fetal personhood, right? So the idea that a fetus from conception is a rights-bearing entity. And if that vision of the law is accepted, well, that is very different from a vision that basically says states can decide for themselves whether to protect or restrict or even prohibit abortion. I mean, that's obviously bad enough, but this would go much further, which it would basically say, if accepted, that no state can permit and even protect abortion because doing so necessarily involves undermining fundamentally the rights of the fetus. So that's, present in the HHS section, that kind of core commitment. There's also this like surveillance state component to the section on HHS, basically requiring states and hospitals to report information on abortions to the federal government and then to punish them by the withholding of funds if they do not do that. So again, rather than leaving alone blue states that have decided to, or not even just blue states, but states that have decided to protect access to abortion, they want to find ways to punish those states through this, reporting and then recrimination regime that's also part of the HHS plan.
And we've seen hospitals do that over the course of really since SB 8 in Texas, and then through the Dobbs decision where, there are people in Texas who she's now suing because of being said that she came in and purposely tried to murder her baby. And she was like, yeah, no. And now I'm suing you. Yeah. And then there's even wilder stories. Moji the Pot story is really wild.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I'm sure you've heard this. Of course you've heard this story. In the summer, the woman in Oklahoma who was given a medical marijuana license while pregnant. And when the prosecutors tried to prosecute her because basically she went to the hospital and they were like, we see marijuana, this is a problem. One of the dissenting judges in her case said, well, the fetus didn't have a medical marijuana license. And that's pure insanity. I laughed with Liz earlier.
It's also a personhood thing.
It's absolutely personhood. But it's also I laughed with Liz today. I was like, so you spend all this money on law school and then you open your mouth and you say something like this? That's not logical. That's just going with your crazy.
It is letting the full crazy fly, but it also it's based in a worldview, which is, again, in this HHS section, which is that, the goal of all of our laws and institutions should be protecting life, quote, from the moment of conception. And this is also from Project 2025, where every human being has inherent worth and dignity and, evidently has the right to consent or not to consent to medical marijuana. I mean, this is it really just is. We are going to, the kind of desensitization to this kind of line of logic or illogic and reasoning, I think is part of the point, right? So if you make enough unhinged claims, that posits this, kind of vision of a fetus, I think it starts to feel less crazy.
Right.
And I think that's part of the point.
Well, and Moji and I talk a lot about when people ask, what do you think that some of the most dangerous abortion laws are? To me, it started with the waiting periods, because once you start down a path of deciding somebody is incompetent, right,
Yeah.
to make decisions, and then when you take it to the next level and say, okay, we've kind of decided that we can't give women any decision making that doesn't have a caveat. And then you start saying that there's this bloodlust around abortion, and there are these like, you're dangerous and you're a danger to your pregnancy. You combine those two things, and it's really leads to me down the path of that women should be a ward of the state because we can't be trusted.
Yes.
And that we're literally monsters.
I think that's right. And I also think there's a profound critique there of even the kind of pre-Dobbs regime, which did allow. So the Supreme Court in the Casey decision, which famously reaffirmed Roe versus Wade and rejected these efforts to remove constitutional protections for abortion access, also upheld most of the Pennsylvania law at issue, including a waiting period. So even in an era in which the Supreme Court decided we did have some constitutional protections for some ability to decide whether to remain pregnant, at least, for a while, not for, the entire pregnancy, at least until the point of viability. But even then, states could take all kinds of really coercive measures permissibly, including making people, go home and think about what they're about to do. Because like that obviously is the logic of these waiting periods. And some of them were paired with required dissemination of sometimes pretty dodgy information about abortion, requiring women to get access to information about adoption and other resources in their states. And, it's why, to my mind, like restoring Roe is an enormously important political message. And the core of it is about restoring, autonomy and liberty. But even under Roe and Casey, like access to abortion was, far from a panacea, both like as a material matter, like obviously you needed the ability to secure access to it. But even as a legal matter, the state could still do a lot to restrict access and to erect hassles between you and your ability to exercise that choice.
It's true. And that phrase undue burden, which was in Casey, was such a wide hole that you could drive a Mack truck to. And that just became, the lawn of the clinic had to be mowed at a certain place or they could find you and shut you down. I mean, it got so ridiculous that it was sort of where we're at. Even though Hellerstedt helped, it all got rolled back after Roe.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking also, of course, the sending it back to the states allows this to happen in secrecy, right? So you're living in New York and maybe you're not fully aware that Mississippi does in fact have these particularly draconian laws because you're like Roe's law of the land, we're set.
Yeah. And it does make me worry too, Kate, as when you look at also just part of the sort of how we help people access care in Project 2025 and how it would stop that, the Comstock Act. And what does that mean for abortion funds? What does that mean for practical support funds? What does that mean for our organization, Abortion Access Front? It's that part feels really scary.
Yeah. So two things about that, right? We haven't talked about, other proposals that are in Project 2025. One is full enforcement of Comstock, right? So essentially to revive this Victorian era statute that criminalizes, sending through the mails like obscene items, including, as they would like to interpret the Comstock Act, items involved in procuring an abortion, which could include not just medication, but also supplies required in the provision of abortion care. And to be clear, I think there is an, completely irrefutable argument that that vision of enforcement of Comstock would be fundamentally inconsistent with our contemporary understandings of the Constitution. Even I actually think that for this Supreme Court, like their enforcement of Comstock is not something that they are going to get away with doing, I think, at least necessarily, but they're certainly going to try. So I think that's really important.
I'm saying Alito stood at the bench and said, what about the Comstock Act?
Oh, absolutely. Alito, Thomas, probably Gorsuch. I can easily count to three. But I actually think that Kavanaugh, Roberts, Barrett, I'm not really sure, I think would have a harder time with at least some aspects of kind of full Comstock revivalism. There's a great article by Reva Siegel and Mary Ziegler, two law professors we had on my podcast, Strict Scrutiny, recently, in which they walk through the history of Comstock. It is so shocking. But nevertheless, that's at the center of their kind of vision. And the other thing, Liz, in terms of, kind of access is there's another proposal in Project 2025 that proposes ending Planned Parenthood's participation in the Medicaid program, right? So there's already this prohibition on Medicaid funding for abortion, but this would be Planned Parenthood provides a huge range of services, obviously beyond just abortion. So it is a key provider of healthcare to lots of under-resourced individuals. And, that includes mammograms and pap smears and all kinds of other services. And they want to sort of end that. And, if that's the cost of ending access to abortion or access to like family planning, they're fine to live with that. Or maybe maybe they're happy, maybe they're enthusiastic about ending access to mammograms because, those are probably pornography as well.
And I remember back during the Trump administration, there was this wild when they talked about Medicaid funding and then they said the places that people could go. They literally said like Walgreens and the
It's a
dentist.
dentist office. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, wow, you really think we're stupid. But Kate, what I wanted to ask you about, because your constitutional scholarly brain, when the big part too is, we've seen Tennessee, they just had a stay on this abortion trafficking garbage and Idaho's got it. And Alabama takes it one step further, not just minors, but others. I was watching this trend and thinking, is this case going to be a Supreme Court case? Because it sure feels weird to be able to say you can't leave your state to go have something or do something that's constitutional in another state.
Yeah. I do think before long, the Supreme Court's going to have to take a case involving one of these state efforts to restrict out-of-state travel, whether that's just for minors or for anybody to procure an abortion. I mean, look, the fifth vote to actually overrule Roe in Dobbs came from Brett Kavanaugh because John Roberts agreed the Mississippi law should stand, but actually said the court didn't need to overturn Roe. So really the overturning Roe part of Dobbs only has 5 votes. And the fifth vote is Brett Kavanaugh, who writes a separate concurrence basically saying, but the right to travel would mean that states could not prohibit individuals leaving the state to access care elsewhere. So, optimistically, that would mean that this Supreme Court, if they're acting in a principled and consistent fashion, and like, maybe I should just stop there. But if they are, it seems to me that they would have to say that a state law like that is unconstitutional. And yet, the right to travel is actually not explicitly in the Constitution. It's something that has been inferred from other guarantees and privileges in the Constitution. In the same way, the right to decide whether to terminate a pregnancy was once understood to be implicit in conceptions of liberty that the Constitution contains. So in some ways, like if they're faithful to the method of Dobbs, it's hard to see how they would not have to find a way to get around that Kavanaugh statement. Even Kavanaugh himself, I'm not sure, would not necessarily walk it back. So there is reason to hope that the court would find those efforts a bridge too far, especially given all the language in Dobbs about how states should be able to decide for themselves. And if a state wants to allow abortion, keeping, another state preventing a woman from traveling to the protective state to access care seems fundamentally inconsistent with notions of federalism, where we get to leave and go to other states if we prefer the regimes there. That's like part of the whole idea. And yet, I don't know, putting a whole lot of faith in the consistency and sort of principle of a majority of the Supreme Court is a very, very difficult thing to kind of, stake much on right now.
But to bring it back to Project 2025, they wouldn't even need the judiciary to do this, right? This would be from the executive branch. And this would basically be the stance of the federal government. So the only recourse would be a state or, I don't know, an individual essentially contesting the federal government.
I think what's so scary here is that federal courts, I think there's no reason to have much faith in federal courts as a backstop. So if you have, whatever happens in Congress, if you do have Project 2025 kind of, proponents in charge of the executive branch, that and both of those, both the judiciary potentially would sign on to, but certainly the executive branch would want to implement this vision in which states do have some autonomy so long as they stay within, like they're on one side of a divide, which is like protect the fetus, do not permit abortion. So maybe a little bit of state leeway in exactly how you restrict or even prohibit abortion might be allowed, but actually protecting access both for women or individuals in your state and for individuals who want to travel from other states would be prohibited. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the combination of those two things is quite chilling.
Well, also, too, I was trying to think of avenues of hope, which is a little bit rough sometimes,
It's
right?
an important exercise, though. Yeah.
Right. And then you're like, oh, well, what if we had a Senate that wouldn't approve these horrible people? And it's like, oh, couldn't the president just put interim garbage people and those interim garbage people could just live in perpetuity like the whole Trump administration basically had a bunch of people who just were never approved by the Senate.
Yeah, so if the Democrats manage to keep the Senate, I think it's right that the power to, confirm or not confirm personnel is an important check on the executive, but you're exactly right. They essentially circumvented that check in the Trump term by installing acting officials, sometimes at the very top levels of the federal government, and that is a workaround. And I mean, Project 2025 and other sections would even go further and basically remove, because even if the top people have to get Senate approval, most of the federal government does not have to go before the Senate. So already the president can install a lot of cronies who don't require Senate confirmation, but this plan would open up enormous swaths of the federal workforce currently populated by civil servants and basically say, no, those people can also be removed at will by the president and replaced by, lackeys and cronies. And so again, the sort of policy and the personnel go very much hand in hand with Project 2025. So I think they understand they would need to have a lot of kind of willing emissaries in the federal government. And right now there might be a lot of resistance to some of what is in the plan. So I think that they, in order to actually see it realized, they would have to figure out how to overhaul at least parts of the federal workforce.
This was so incredibly helpful. We touched a lot of stuff. What could you tell our listeners to look for that maybe we didn't touch on, or maybe give a little bit of like, here's where you can take your power, kind of anything positive. Please help us.
Please.
I'm pretty fixated on state courts at the moment because obviously this is really important. We're talking about in terms of what happens on the ballot and in the federal government. And of course, the federal courts, which are not directly elected. But, in most states, voters have some say in some of their judges. And in about half the states, voters actually do choose the jurors who sit on their highest courts. And there are states like Ohio and Michigan where the balance of those courts is on the ballot this fall. And so, what it will mean to implement. So those states have had ballot initiatives that have actually enshrined reproductive freedom in their state constitutions, Ohio, Michigan. But of course, as we should know at this moment in our history, like guarantees are kind of in the eye of the beholder in many ways. So what the courts in those states make of those reproductive freedom initiatives is kind of the whole ball game. And so I actually just think staying really focused on and maybe getting involved in the races for those state Supreme Courts. And those are the two that are, like the actual control of those courts is at stake in this election. But other states like North Carolina and Montana have important seats that are up. So I just say, like in terms of action items, pay really close attention to what is happening on the courts and in particular the Supreme Court in your state. If you're able to, you can get involved in those races. They're, judicial races. They have sometimes different constraints than other kinds of races, but you can typically volunteer and find ways to give money, sometimes directly to the campaigns and sometimes to independent groups. But I think talking to people around you also about the importance of state courts is one, hopefully useful action item that people can take into November.
Thank you. That's an incredible action item, actually.
Okay. Good.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an insightful and exciting conversation. I love getting into the weeds about what's happening in our country and how it works. And your insight was really, really, really phenomenal. And I'm so grateful you came and shared it with us.
Kate, thank you so much. And before you go, tell people where they can find you.
Sure. So the Strict Scrutiny podcast, which I co-host with my badass co-hosts, Leah Littman and Melissa Murray, part of Crooked Media, drops every Monday morning and in all the places, Blue Sky, Instagram, still sort of ghosting on X. I haven't personally posted on X in a very long time, but we're technically still residing there. So you can download our episodes wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on all those places.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hopefully you'll come back because you are the best explainer maybe on the planet. It was awesome.
It was so awesome.
Great to be with you. I appreciate you having me.
I love Kate Shaw. Please check out Kate's podcast, Strict Scrutiny, and follow her on all the socials. You can find all the links in our show notes. I love those three women, and Kate was great. Okay. I'm excited because we've been gone for a while and we're coming back hard with a new game.
A new game.
And it's a game where I get to test Moji, and I'm super excited.
Ooh.
Timeless or Tasteless, the game where I will read 3 based or bigoted quotes and give you 5 different time periods throughout history, Moji, and you choose which one you think is correct. Bonus points worth nothing if you can tell me also who said it. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm excited to win this game, Liz.
Okay, quote number 1. This is firmly established law in Scripture that if you bear false witness, you will be punished with the same punishment in court and the community. Proverbs 19:5. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. Okay. Is this from 1930, 1870, 1967, 1977, or 2024?
This is very stumpy for me, but I'm going to go with the 1800s option.
Are you?
It just seems very old timey.
Okay. Well, you would be wrong, Moji, because it is from this very year, 2024.
Nice.
And it's a quote from Operation Save America leader and Oklahoma State Senator Dusty Devers.
Yep, that man is still living in the 1800s. So I stand my ground.
You do, but in this game, you did not get a point.
No, I go.
So, moving on, my friend. Quote number 2. I claim to have driven 15 persons to suicide in my fight for the young.
Give me my remaining years, please.
1930,
Mhm.
1870, 1967, or 1977?
I'm going to go with the first option there, the 1930.
You're going with 1930. And Moji, you would be incorrect.
Woo, I see a theme with me in this. And who said that and when did they say it?
That was the one and only man of the month, Anthony Comstock.
Oh no.
Yes, it is true. I am so very, very sorry.
He seems like a man who would drive some people to suicide and brag about it.
He
Yep,
actually did. That is true. That is true about Comstock. The Comstock Act, it was so relentless and oppressive that the people that he invaded their mail and their lives, 15 of them took unalive themselves because they were so shamed, and he destroyed their world.
and he bragged about it.
Yeah,
What a man to emulate.
it is wild. Okay, Mo, you're 0 for 2. This is your last chance at winning hard. Are you ready?
I am feeling really hopeful.
Okay, last question. I don't think it's supposed to work that way at all. I think it's disgraceful. I think what the Supreme Court did with these decisions, they have declared war, particularly against women and reproductive rights. Okay, your years left are 1930, 1967, or 1977.
Was it 77?
Moj,
Yes.
it was not.
Oh man.
It was 1967, and it was said by Bill Baird. And do you remember when Barry Lynn was on talking about Bill Baird, who was the person who
Absolutely.
argued for contraception and abortion? He was like a leader in the modern movement to emancipate us fully. He was great. So that was a quote by Bill Baird. These were hard.
They were. I got to catch up on my based and biased quotes, apparently.
You do, based and biased quotes. But you know what? Everyone here is a winner, Moji,
Oh, thank you, Liz.
except for Dusty Devers, who will eternally be a loser.
Always a loser.
That was fun. You know what, Moj, when we do it again, you just have to prep a little more. Maybe you can bribe Dukes as they were helping me with this.
That sounds like a good starter plan.
Okay, you ready? Let's bring on our next guest. You had the very amazing privilege of talking to.
I got to chat about being hilarious, feminist, and Muslim, basically the total package, with comedian, actor, and writer Zainab Johnson, whose comedy special Hijabs Off on Amazon Prime is a must-see. Zainab, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Moji. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here with us today because you are so funny. And a lot of times women, people of color, Muslim people, maybe don't necessarily give themselves permission to be funny, so funny, and like just jump into it. So I'm wondering, can you tell us like what was the moment when you decided like, fuck it, I'm funny. Like I'm going to be funny. Like this is who I am.
So the moment that I decided that I was going to be funny, and the moment that I did stand up are two very different moments.
Or like that you could be funny, right? That like this was your birthright.
Well, the reason why I like differentiated between the two is because usually for people that moment comes before they actually attempt it, right? For me, it came after. I had no plans on being funny. I had no idea I could be funny. I'm always surprised at this point in my life and career where I get messages from people from high school and they're like, "Girl, it's so lovely to see like you just thrive as a comedian because you were always so funny." I'm like, "Where? When? What?" I have not one memory of my high school days, somebody coming up to me like, Zainab, tell that funny story. I have no memory of that. But I think that I decided to try stand-up comedy after working for someone who like a manager of stand-up comics and a booker. And I saw something very specific, or rather, I didn't see something, which was a diverse representation of women and female voices. And I wouldn't even say diverse. I mean, I think I saw one or two voices like I don't know, maybe like Sarah Silverman and Tiffany Haddish, and like that's it. That's what I was seeing over and over and over in these live spaces. You know, like I don't even think about the TV or movie spaces because that's just a kind of a different level.
Different
But
level, yeah.
just on a live space, the place that everyone is that is more achievable for everyone.
Right.
I was seeing the same like one or two people. And so I don't think I saw that and was like, I'm the solution, but I just noticed that that's a problem.
Mhm.
And so I think that and a few other things inspired me to give it a try. And I thought that I was always like a really logical person, you know, always really good at math. And I think that I look at things a bit formulaic for that reason. And me being around comedy a lot, I started picking up formulas like, oh, okay, well, this, but plus that is why they're laughing, you know? His look plus you know what I'm saying? Like it's not just
Yes.
the words. And so I think I thought about it from that from that way at first. But then as I continued to do it, I think I realized like, oh no, there is a very specific, intentional, aggressive motivation to keep women's voices out of this, to keep
Mhm.
women of color out of it. There's action taken on a daily basis to keep our voices marginalized. And I think it was in that moment that I said, no, I can be funny and I am going to be funny.
Mhm.
And I'm going to make it so that you can't keep me out.
I 100% agree with you that there are all these barriers that people put in place to basically keep marginalized people, women, people of color out of queer people out of spaces. Is there something you saw in particular or like something you experienced that you can put your finger on? You're like, that was the thing that
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
burn it all down.
Yeah. Like if you go to a comedy club, if you go to almost any comedy club in the country, any mainstream comedy club in the country, you're going to get a list of straight white guys.
Mm, mhm.
And so that symbolism alone is like, oh, that's crazy. Because I know a lot of people, a lot of women I know a lot of people who are not straight white guys that make me laugh all the time. And like, yeah, then you'll see like some straight black guys, right, who are like superstars like Eddie Murphy, Kevin Hart, et cetera, you know?
Mhm.
But it's like, this is a very specific looking thing. And why is that? And you know what the other thing was for me? I'm going to be really, really honest with you. It'd be one thing if you're just seeing a lineup of all male perspectives. But if every so often one of those male perspectives were like, women are great, right? And it's like this male perspective on top of like, so I got to listen to 10 different ways why women suck. Oh, wait.
Yes.
It's like you almost feel obligated to be like, well, let me at least try.
Oh, it's obvious that you not almost, you felt obligated and you stood up and you were like, watch this. And I love that you mentioned this before, but I just want to dive in a little more because like you don't miss, right? Like your jokes are all, I've spent a time on your Instagram. I'm like, why is everything hilarious?
I miss, trust me.
It's funny. You're so funny, but it's like not class clown funny. I'm going to go back to how you were talking about how you're so logical because it really does feel like you like think through this joke. You've thought it through in a really measured way. And I was just like, it's funny because my question was actually like, am I just assuming that because your jokes are so perfect? Or is that really how you approach your joke writing?
So, like from my special, right? My sister, right in front of me, my sister who has never been to medical school, is not a doctor. The first time I heard her say, introduce herself as Dr. Mrs. because her husband is a doctor, that stood out to me, right? That was like jarring to me, you know? And so I thought, that's funny. That's funny to me. So I'm not going to try and write. I didn't sit down and then take a pen and a pad and write jokes about it. I just knew Dr. Mrs. I have an opinion about Dr. Mrs. And so the next time I get on stage, I kind of explore it. And so the first time you see it, it might be a bit all over the place or really long-winded because I'm actually doing that sort of pen to pad thing that certain people, I'm doing it live on stage in front of the audience.
So you're doing it like Jay-Z raps.
Yeah. Except the first time I do it ain't the final track. It ain't. Please, I don't want the quote, I'm the Jay-Z of comedy. I do not want that quote.
I like it. You heard it here first. Zainab Johnson, the Jay-Z of comedy.
But I have realized now, I'll have friends like listen to my material and I'll say, hey, am I missing an angle here? Or is this making sense? And I'll notice that because comedians, we do that a lot for each other. We provide tags. It's almost like it's the equivalent of being on a basketball court with someone and seeing them shoot, like that they're a good player, seeing them shoot and saying, oh, the reason why the basket isn't going in all the time is because they're not jumping off of their toes. And so you go to them and say, hey, great job, jump off your toes. Comedians have the same, like, oh, that was so funny. What if you said, you know what I'm saying? You could, and you could go there with it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
So I find that when that sort of feedback or help comes my way, I am really open to it, but I'm very particular. So like,
I was going to ask, I'm like, how do you know who to trust?
I trust my instincts before I trust anybody. So very early in my career, when I started my career, I had a shaved head. Completely shaved. I felt like I needed to do jokes about my physical identity because this is not, you see it now very often on stage, but you did not see it when I first started. When I started in 2010, you were not seeing a tall, thin, beautiful, I say that humbly, Black woman get on stage with a shaved head telling jokes. You just didn't see it, right? And so I think when I would immediately command people's attention, but I think they thought I was about to do a spoken word piece or something. And so that's where I would start my humor. Like, I know I look like this, but I'm probably going to be a little bit more this, right? And a comedian came up to me after I did one of my sets and he said, oh, you should tell them, you could tell the audience that, you don't have any hair on your head, but you got a bush on your vagina.
Oh, gosh. Where's the punchline there?
I think he was trying to go with the carpet doesn't match the drapes.
Still looking for the joke.
I digested it. And then I said to him, thank you. I said, but two things. It's not true. Also, I don't really want people thinking about my vagina. That was literally the way my brain works. So when you say, are you like really logical or formulaic? To the extent that that's how I'm processing, how I process as a comedian for the most part is how I process as a woman in this world every single moment. I just pick out the moments that I think are humorous and I bring them to the stage.
I love that. And that's what I hear when I listen to your comedy. So you are very vocally and very proudly a Muslim woman and a feminist. And I know that Muslims are not a monolith. My dad's Muslim, so sometimes I claim Muslim adjacency. What's a Muslim culture thing that you think would make the rest of the world just a little more chill? Like, what are non-Muslims missing that would just make the world better if they just embrace this part of your interpretation of Muslimness?
This is going to sound crazy, but all the Muslims or people who are raised in Muslim culture will get it. We have this thing called astinja. I think astinja is the Arabic word. And forgive me if my pronunciation is not correct. I have a lot of people all around the world telling me how I don't even pronounce my name correctly. And that's okay.
That's fine.
But I believe that it is the Arabic translation of cleansing. Anyway, we make astinja when we use the bathroom. Every time. And whether it's number one, number two.
Sound like a bidet?
Yes, that is the closest thing. And, I mean, seriously, I don't have a bidet in my house like that. I think that that's real posh and cute. But I remember when I first moved to California, my boyfriend, he would go into the bathroom and he would find this water bottle right by the toilet. Every time and he would be like, "What is this? Why, why do you keep leaving a water bottle in here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have to clean myself after every bathroom use. Like, there's no way I'm leaving a bathroom without cleansing myself with water. That's not happening." It's a very, very Islamic thing.
Mhm.
And I'm telling you, if people were walking around with fresh private parts all throughout the day,
Mhm.
it would change your life.
That is not the chill I expected, but I like that a lot.
That was like the TMI. I think the other thing, I do this a lot. I do this a lot. I know that's the thing. That's like a very obscure, that's a very private and obscure thing. This guy I'm dating, I'm saying all the things that are haram, right? Oh, how many guys are you dating? This guy I dated, I told him about it. I explained it to him. And the reason why I do that is because however fast they are able to accept that, because that's something people, especially Americans, are not used to, right?
Yeah.
We use toilet paper. It's very specific. Baby wipes, whatever. Whenever a guy accepts that little detail about me and makes accommodations for it in their place, I really, really appreciate that. Tells me a lot. So I told this guy, and he's a musician, and one day he was shooting a music video, and they shot it at an Islamic school. When the video shoot wrapped, he calls me immediately. He said, "I think I was at an Islamic school." And I was like, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because they had that thing that you always have in the bathroom in every single stall." And I was like, "Yeah." And then he showed me, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
now he knows something that's a very obscure detail of the home life of Muslims. But the thing that I like to do is just like the greetings won't harm you. You can say assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam to anybody. It is literally the Arabic translation of peace be unto you and peace be unto you as well. A lot of people see it as something religious, and it simply makes you bilingual.
I love that. All right. So I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. Can you discuss hijabs off? I just have one comment, which is you set that show in the round, which is a wild choice. I'm just like, are you trying to convey fearlessness? Are you just reminding us all that you look great in every angle? Like, why did you choose to set it in the round?
I chose to set it in the round because it felt really intimate. And I did want the audience to see all angles, but not because I feel like I look good at all angles. I feel like there's always a side of ourselves that we would prefer for the world not to see. And I felt like if I couldn't control that it would just be another element that made the really vulnerable content that I was sharing also feel kind of like intimate. I didn't want the people watching at home to feel any different from the people who were there.
Mhm.
And it seemed like the best way to execute that was to not only shoot in the round, but to also film using a lot of long shots and handheld cameras. There's times where I'm delivering a punchline and the cinematographer, he's behind me, and I'm like, do I need to see a person's face every time to hear what they're saying?
Right.
Like, I think I wanted to go back to how we sort of exist with one another in the real world.
I heard you talking about it and saying that you didn't want your special to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you failed in that because it was pretty great. And that suit was incredible. But what is like deciding to not chase perfectionism as a comedian? Like, what does that mean to you?
Recently, I've gotten this question in like different ways a lot lately. And I love it because, one, to not chase perfection really kind of, it feels much better. It's way less stressful.
It is. It's a lot less stressful. Absolutely. A little more real.
Yeah. And I personally gravitate towards that. I personally like to see things that feel they feel much more real than polished. And, it's like, especially with social media and stuff like that, the internet editing, all that, we can put a perfect version of ourselves out there and we can pretend, but it's like, really, this life is messy, but it can still be a great life,
Mhm.
just messy. And so that's just my default. Also, and this goes back to Islam. As a Muslim, I was taught and believe very deeply that the only thing that is perfect is Allah.
Mhm.
In the entire universe, anything that you can think of, the only thing that's perfect for a Muslim is Allah. That's the only thing, not the Prophet Muhammad, no, only Allah. And so with that being my default setting, I don't never have to strive for perfection.
Right. Because you have perfection in Allah. It's not even for you.
It's actually the nerve of me to think I could be perfect, you know?
Yes. Zainab, thank you so much for this. The time really rushes by. I mean, I'm so glad you could join me, but can you let the listeners know before you go where to find you in the internet and all the places they would want to find you?
Absolutely. If you have not watched my special already, please watch it. It is called Hijabs Off. It is streaming only on Prime in multiple countries. But if you have Prime, you can get it. My website, Zainab Johnson, Zainab Johnson, will give you all of my tour dates. And then if you just want to keep up with me, watch clips and, you know what I'm saying, just like feel like my friend, social media is always a good route. And on Instagram, Facebook, and X, I am Zainab Johnson. And on TikTok, it is the Zainab Johnson.
Oh, Zainab, thank you so much for all of that. We'll make sure all of this is in our show notes.
Oh, Moji, thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
You heard her. Make sure to check out her series and special on Amazon Prime. Listen to her pod and don't miss her live tour. For dates, go to zainabjohnson.com. Info and links are in our show notes. Liz, that's our show. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Kate Shaw. Make sure to go like and subscribe to the Strict Scrutiny pod. You really have to. They're incredible.
They are so awesome. So I know we made you smarter today and that we made you laugh. So show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us on all social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access.
And remember your Comstocktober action items. Operation Save Abortion on October 8th is our ballot initiative training series. You can also sign our petition to repeal the Comstock Act at aafront.org and watch the Comstock and Tina Smith debate on Halloween. Details for all of this will be in our show notes.
Looking for where you might fit in to do some abortion activism next week? Our friends at Faith Choice Ohio, who you remember we talked with on the pod last week, are having a religion and repro training. You'll learn amazing theological perspectives around abortion, trans care, and other repro topics, and learn the history of religious pro-choice advocacy and the role modern religious voices play in securing abortion access and defending reproductive freedom in the U.S. The link can be found in our activist calendar, which is located at operationsaveabortion.com.
Next week, we'll be prepping for our Operation Save Abortion ballot initiatives training, so no podcast. But if you can't make it to the training, we'll be dropping it as a podcast in a couple of weeks with links to the toolkits. So you can jump in and help on getting ballot initiatives passed in all of the states that have them this November.
So important. And join our Patreon. You'll support great content and get cool merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTournay and is produced by Abortion Access Front.
Finally, we leave you with Steph Wilson, a woman showing us her whole ass with a logical fallacy about progressives that is heavy on the phallus.
Your daughter's future safety by not letting in third world criminals and rapists over the border by the thousands is a lot more important than which state she can choose to kill her baby in someday.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.